Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Hilltop Pillbox here in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada. And today, yes, wonderful music, eh? There's nothing like some good film score music to play your Axis and Allies games to, I think. Something it adds quite a bit, I think. But anyway, that's just me. So here we're looking at 1914, obviously, and there is something I have been working through the math on, and working through the gameplay on, and I've run a few simulations. And there's always a balance to be struck between historical accuracy and game playability. And it's a fantastic balance that gets struck in many games where you pay homage to certain realities of war and things that went on. But then again, you just have to sometimes just, let the people play, right? And so I have found that in 1914, we all know Central Powers are pretty hard pressed to win. And so in the spirit of that, I've done something here that may actually look like it hurts the Central Powers, but as I've rolled it out a few times, it actually seems to help them. So just going to mention what that is. It's very simply a reach back into history to a fact that Italy remained neutral through midway through 1915. And I don't have the exact date. It was in somewhere April, May, June in 1915, where they finally declared war on the Central Powers. They sided with the Entente. But there was a time when they were going to side with the Central Powers, but because of a major disagreement about the mountain areas between Tyrolia and, on this map, Venice, the Italians and the Austro-Hungarians really didn't like each other. Plus, Austria-Hungary is this, empire, and Italy's trying to sell itself as a democracy. We've come together, 1848. Anyway, I'm not going to bore you about all the stories, Garibaldi and whatnot. But anyway, the idea is that they really had a lot of angst for the Austro-Hungarians, and that really helped them side with the French and the English and the Russians. They really didn't like the French that much, to be honest, and we found that out 20 years later. But in this game and set in this universe, we're gonna add something to the game. Now, this is just for me. This is obviously not official. I certainly haven't talked with Larry Harris about it. I haven't spoken to anybody else about this. This is just my own little brainchild. So take it or leave it. Essentially, what I do is I keep Italy neutral for round one. So Italy cannot be attacked. And so they're going to retain, at the end of their turn, their full money. But here's the thing. Because they're not on a war footing, they're not going to get all their money for purchases at the start of the game. So typically Italy gets $14. Well, Italy, none of its units can then move off of Italian territories. So, for instance, these fellas in Libya can't, go shore up Egypt, and they can't, hop on a transport and go take Albania, which is a typical move in this game. If the Austro-Hungarians haven't taken it, of course, which they usually haven't because they have to invade Serbia, which again is a reach back to history, and they wanted to keep it historically accurate, and that's why Austria-Hungary goes first and not Germany in this game. And so Austria-Hungary cannot attack Venice. Typically there's a big push into there. Sometimes Venice falls on round one, and in many cases it falls on round one, or it gets battered down into submission. So the Italians, they rush in everything they can, which isn't much, seven men and an artillery, and that's usually chewed up on round two. So for my part, keeping Italy neutral, which is historically accurate, also improves gameplay a little bit, because Italy is only going to get $7. They're going to get half of their war footing money to start the game. So in round one, they're only going to be able to purchase $7 worth, or they can carry it over to round two's purchase and have 21. I don't know why they would, but they could. And then they can move. Now, they can obviously move inside their own territory, so they can shore up in here, they can bring stuff up and make that a bit of a mess. But at the same point, Austria-Hungary can bring over much more stuff than Italy can and have an even bigger punch. Plus, if the Germans feel like playing, they can send stuff down here and punch as well. And I've done that a couple times, where the Germans will send down some troops from Munich into Tyrolia and then attack Trieste on round 2, because Italy declares war. Italy is considered to declare war at the end of round 1. Now, the reason I chose 1 round and not maybe 2 or 3 is because America has the 3-round thing, and they came in 17, 3 years after the war began, and Italy a year after, so I figured 1 round. So, let me know in the comments below what you think about that. So Italy gets 7 to spend at the start of the round. They can move everything they want to inside their own borders. But this also gives them a chance to retreat, which I've seen as well. I've done that as well, where they pull back, shore up, and then blast forward, hoping to draw off AH power from Russia in that sense, because then they're punching in pretty hard with over 20 units, or 20 infantry and 6 artillery, so it's a pretty good punch. So there's that. But let me know in the comments below what you think. I'm going to have a solo game here. I'm also wondering, or I'm not wondering, I'm going to be showing you a small-scale version of battling when people get to Burgundy or Picardy. Okay, what I've done is using just a hex-based map, I have designed a trench warfare system that will utilize everything that goes into that territory, and you actually do multiple rounds of combat, but it's based on trench warfare. And so the attacker really will need more oomph. And so the good thing for the Germans is they have more oomph at the start, but then for the French to take it back, it'll be a real meat grinder, which is again more historically accurate. And so far it has tended to favor the Germans, just because of the sheer weight of numbers that they can bring west. But I'll be showing you that, maybe I'll show you that partway through the video, or maybe at the end of the video, and you can let me know what you think about that as well. I'll go into more detail at that time. Anyway, so we're about to start. Italy is going to remain neutral for round 1, and we'll see how that affects the game. Here we are, Axis and Allies 1914. Here we go. Alright, so here we are with a quick mock-up of the trench warfare system I've been developing, and there's still some kinks in it, still some things I'm trying to work out, but I'm going to give you the skinny today, and if you have any suggestions or comments or anything like that, feel free to leave them below, and hey, let's work on this together. These are the bare bones of it, and away we go. So the first thing is that this will only happen in a couple of select territories. Burgundy definitely being one, and probably Picardy, and I'm debating about Marseille. Now those are the 3 that will block access to Paris. Bordeaux is essentially blocking access to Paris, but I personally have never seen anything go into Bordeaux. But once Marseille, Burgundy, and Picardy fall, Paris is in a lot of trouble. So if the French have a force in Picardy or Burgundy and the Germans come in, then then this board gets taken out, and you'll transfer the armies you have onto this sheet. Now I've play tested this a lot, but it's only me. So other people have different insight, different experience. If you want to try this at home, maybe show where the faults lie in this thing. I personally love the single round of combat. I think it's a really great mechanic to use in this sort of a game. It shows the frustration of trying to have a major offensive that might just get stalled, and then the next turn the other guy moves in more guys and can counterpunch, and yeah, so I get it. I think it's a great idea. But I thought, let's just go a little deeper here into what happened in World War One, and maybe people are able to spend a little bit more time and effort and money trying to creatively defeat their enemies. So essentially what happens here is I got this little map, and I've written a couple of notes on it here. You'll see that this line here at the bottom kind of delineates the map. Nobody can go outside of that, and there's one at the top. This one here is the defensive line, okay? And then it's not barbed wire, but it looks like barbed wire. That's going to be the no man's land marker, and as soon as the attacker, now this could be this way, right? You could have the French coming this way, but essentially, to set for our thing today, we have the Germans coming across. They'll have artillery support blasting away, but once the Germans get past this line, artillery support can no longer be used. Now, as we know, early in the war especially, artillery support was non-existent. They just blast away for hours, days, weeks, or possibly months on the enemy position, just rain hundreds of thousands of shells down on an area, figure everything was dead, and then they all got up to walk out, and they got massacred because, of course, people dug holes and just stayed in them for a while. Now, life was not great for people under bombardment, but at least you weren't dying. And so in this game here, in this scenario that I have developed, people can buy certain things to kind of help you get around some of the problems and maybe have a little bit of counterpunch that's not existent before. So I've introduced in this version here 3 different things that will help establish more of a World War I feel to the battles. And again, this is only happening in a couple of select territories. The rest of the game, just march all over the place and blast away. All right. So here we got the French are being attacked, and in this game, the French have to, or in this situation, pardon me, the French have to set up first. So they have to set up, and in this version, I've got 15 German infantry and 5 artillery. The French have 12 defending and 4 artillery. So 12 defending infantry and 4 artillery. I figure that's about how things are in many games. Germans have a slight numerical advantage and probably get dragged down. Now, just for the record, the French could retreat. They don't even have to set up and fight this. They could say, nope, screw it, we're out of here. We're not going to fight. Because of this map, you can lose a lot of stuff. And so the French might say no. Now you can also inflict a lot of casualties. But it's up to the defender. Defender, if somebody goes into Burgundy or Picardy, it's the Germans. If they come into Picardy or Burgundy and the French are there and they have very few troops, they can actually retreat. Of course, that gives control to the Germans and they get the money, but you save your army. So you can retreat out of Burgundy or Picardy as the French. The Germans may also retreat out of Burgundy or Picardy when the French counterattack, French and English. Okay? All right, so here we are. Now, there are limitations that I have placed on this this map here. One is that because the artillery, they're going to have some real fun in this one. Artillery, the numbers are limited. All right, so the defender is only allowed to have 1 piece of artillery, and the attacker is only allowed to have 2 pieces of artillery. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now, artillery, I don't know if you know this, but artillery was the #1 cause of death in World War I. Just shredded millions. I thought it was a machine gun. I saw a trivia question on this, and I thought it was a machine gun. This is years. It was like 20 years ago I saw this, and I thought, oh, it's a machine gun. I've read all the books and I've seen the movies, but no, it's artillery, and that's how sad that is. And they figure, I've seen numbers from 10 to 100,000 men died, and we don't even know they existed if it wasn't for their records, right? Because they were gone, like just gone from the artillery blast. So we're so fortunate that despite the problems we have in our world today, that ain't one of them. So really grateful for that. So here we go. The French have to set up first because the Germans are the attackers, and typically you would survey a position and study it, and then you know what you're getting into. So the French are going to set up, and and you can set this up however you'd like, right? You can say, oh, I'm going to do that. And the artillery has unlimited range, and since the defender only gets one artillery, we'll just place it in the middle there. Okay, maybe the French will do that. There's really, this is just an example. Okay, but also what the French can do, and I don't know if you can see it there, but I'll just zoom in. Probably shouldn't have put things on the map yet, but all right. So if you just zoom in there, you can see we've got barbed wire that you can buy, and it's 1 IPC. So the French could say, you know what, we're going to throw some barbed wire down here. Throw some barbed wire, and we're going to spend, 4 IPCs worth of barbed wire. Now what barbed wire does is it can slow down the infantry, because infantry in this version can move one space and attack. Artillery can move or attack, but since artillery has unlimited range on these maps, the attacker typically won't move, but the defender can certainly move artillery out of the way if they want. So you can put some barbed wire up in here, and maybe the French will say, we'll spend 5. All right. What barbed wire does is as the Germans come along, and they can move and attack, they're going to say, I want to move into here. And they go into the barbed wire, and they got to roll a die. And if you roll a 1 to a 4, if you roll a 1, I'm getting ahead of myself here. If you roll a 1, the barbed wire is cut, and boom, and you can attack that round as well. Now, infantry have a range of 3. Okay? Now, I didn't realize I didn't have my camera centered on that little event there. Okay? So what happens is the Germans come in and they roll a die. If they roll a 1, they remove the barbed wire. The engineers were successful, and they can attack at a range of 3. Okay? And you can target whatever you want. Okay? So that's that. If they roll a 2 to a 5, they go in, but the barbed wire remains. And you flip it over because now they're going to be there for a turn cutting barbed wire. Okay? If they roll a 6 trying to get in, they are repulsed and they have to go back to where they were, and they cannot attack that round, even if they're within range of 3 of the French or their enemy. Okay, so a 1, they go in and cut the barbed wire, it's gone. A 2, they go in and now they've got to work on the barbed wire, 2 to a 5, and then a 6, nope, ineffectual, you get driven back. Okay, and that's that. Artillery can target barbed wire, and they can destroy it. Right now I've got it that they can destroy it on a 1 or a 2. I might move that to a 1. We'll see. Alright, so that's barbed wire. That's how barbed wire works. Great. Now we have trench works. Now trench works are 3 IPCs. It costs a bit more. And so the French can say, you know what, we're going to put all these lads into trenches here. Now that's great. Trenches are great defensive fortifications, especially at this time of warfare. They're very extensive systems. They had communications trenches, and they had observation trenches, and all the rest, and they had supply trench. Everything was basically done underground, or below the line of sight from your enemy. And so the French are doing this. Now, if you're in the trench works, essentially anything in a trench work that gets attacked, the enemy has basically a +1 to their die roll. And what I mean is if they roll like the infantry as they attack, they only attack at a 2, and if they do that, they now have to attack at a 1. Alright, so they basically, if they roll a 2, it's not a hit, it's actually a 3. So hopefully that makes sense. Some people say it's a -1 on your die roll, but in this situation I think it's kind of like a +1 on your die roll. It's a bad thing. Okay, so when you attack. Attacking out of a trench works, no change, you still defend at a 3. Okay, but you only have a range of 3. Okay? Now, I think that's it for trench works. Now the thing is, all this stuff here that you want to buy, so if the French wanted to buy all this, that's 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So they could set up a good defensive box here for $14. Unfortunately, that comes out of their money. And at this point in the war, you know, if people are coming into Burgundy, the French are probably down to like 17, 18 bucks, maybe less. And so this is a huge chunk of their turn's purchasing power. So it's unlikely that this would happen like this. It's much more likely that they would probably have maybe 3 barbed wire and 1 trench works. You know, something like that, maybe. But of course, you can spend what you got, right? Because of you know, it's up to you what you want to do. So we'll say we'll give him 2 trench works and 3 barbed wire. Okay. So now the Germans have seen this, so now they can decide how they're going to set up their attack. And they say, well, we're going to stay out of the middle, and we're going to attack on the side. Now they have to set up in the last row that's available to them. All right, and we'll go there. So that's the last row that's available to them, and they're going to start marching. Now, the artillery, they only get 2. They only get 2 artillery, and artillery, of course, has no range limitations. And there's something else that the artillery can do that's kind of neat, and that is poison gas. So they can buy poison gas. It costs 5 IPC, which means that if you're the attacker, you need to have saved money that you want to spend on this attack. So, of course, you got to plan ahead, and you got to be very thoughtful of what you're going to do. So you spend the 5 IPC. All right. Now, of course, you don't spend the 5 APC until the French have set up. So if the French say we don't want battle here and they retreat into Paris, you don't need to buy the poison gas. You don't need to that. Now you have set aside $5, which is great for you. You know, next round kind of sucks you didn't spend it on troops this round, but there you go. Okay. One thing about this is that there are a few ways that this battle board can finish. One, the attacker gets wiped out, or the defender gets wiped out. Okay, that's what can happen there. 2, the defender retreats. 3, the attacker calls off the attack. Or 4, when the attacker is able to get troops to the very last line on this side. So if these guys can get all the way to this side, that ends. And then all the guys who are left are routed, and they gotta basically retreat off the map into the next territory, but they lose any artillery that is still there. Okay, so this artillery would just be lost. And I'm debating about making it captured. It's very similar if you've ever played American Civil War by Eagle Games, which is a fantastic game, but it's hard to find anybody to play with these days. Then you know I might turn that into a German artillery, and they get to keep it. In fact, I probably will. That way you won't bugger off too quickly. But so there you go. You have recycling trucks here. You won't have, or you have those ways that it can end. One side gets destroyed, the attacker calls it off, the defender retreats, or the attacker gets to the last line of the defender's zone. Okay? There you go. So that's that. Now, how does gas work? Well, it's fun in a kind of a sad way. What you do is you pick a place that you want it to land. Okay, so maybe the Germans say we're going to fire our gas there. Okay, and then you roll a die. And when you roll a die, it's either a 1 to 5 means it lands, no problem. A 6 means something went wrong and it didn't launch. Okay, so they'd roll, got a 3. Okay, so it lands there. That's great. And now, to start each round for 2 rounds, okay, so gas is persistent for 2 rounds, and then it disappears. You got a wind gauge here. I'll see if I can zoom in on the wind gauge. All right, so you can see those are the directions for the wind. So then, they've landed here, we're about to start the battle, and then we roll. We got a 2. So the gas shifts this way, a 1, 2. So it's there now, and it's going to last for 1 more round. So at the start of next turn, for any gas, so if they had bought a couple of gas, let's say they bought one here too, and the wind is the same, of course, for both poison. There, I'm not on the... I'm not used to shooting like this. Okay, so let's say this is where they had targeted them, and they both landed fine, because each artillery can fire one, and then the 2 means that they move that way. At the start of the next round, you'd roll again, and it would shift. Now, what the French can do is say, we're out of here. We're going to move into places where that gas cannot get us. You certainly can do that. Okay, but remember, when you come out of your trench works, now the artillery can hit you without any penalty to their die. Okay? But this is what gas does. Okay? Now, gas was heavier than air, and so the trench works will not defend you from the gas. So as you come in, as the gas comes in, you're going to roll a D3. Now, what a D3 is when you take a D6 and you roll and you cut the number in half, rounding up. Okay? So we'd use this poison gas here. We got a 3. Cut it in half is 1.5, rounded up to 2. So at that point, boom, 2 French troops just got killed. Done. No response, nothing. Okay? Now, there you go. Now the most you can lose is 3. Okay? So as a defender, if you think that they're going to, watch what they buy, right? Watch what they buy, because you see that they've kept $10 behind and might buy a couple of poison gases. In which case, when you set up your defensive line, maybe put 1 guy in each spot as best you can, and then load up a couple here and there. All right? And then on this one here, it rolls. We got a 3 again, so 2 more guys are dead. Okay, it's pretty devastating, but it also costs the Germans $10 to buy these things, and they'll only persist for 1 more round. All right? So that would be it. Now that might be the second round, because they all came up here, and then let's pretend we rolled a 6, and they all moved in. Okay, and that's what they would do. But after 2 rounds, the gas is gone. It's completely ineffectual again, and you can get down to business. Okay, and the business is, of course, war. So the artillery, there are 2 artillery here, and they are going to have unlimited range and can target anything except other artillery. Now the reason I've done that is for obvious reasons. Is that everybody with the attacker would target the artillery of the defender. It would likely be killed in the first round, and then the defender has no more artillery the rest of the battle, and that's not fun. So what I did instead was I gave them a 2-to-1 advantage in artillery, and then the defender can still take pot shots, but that's about it. Okay? Alright, so now, at the start of the round, here we are, the artillery begins the rounds. Okay, so the artillery has 2 shots, and we'll see, these guys are up here. Now, unlimited range can fire at anything. Remember though, loses a point on the die, right? So let's just say they're going to give it a whirl. They're going to fire 2 at these trench works here. Okay, so now artillery typically hits on a 3, on a 4 if it has aircraft, but I've kept aircraft out of this. So let's say it hits at a 3. Now it has to hit at a 2. So we roll, got a 3 and a 6, so those both missed. Alright, but now the Germans can move and shoot. You can't move and shoot artillery, they just move or shoot. So the Germans move up. Okay, and there you go. Now, that's the end of the German turn. Now the French do not have to stay in their trench works. They can come on out if they want and start shooting. The problem with that is that when they come out of their trench works, they no longer receive that bonus to their defense. Okay, so it's probably a good idea to stick around. But the artillery gets to shoot for the French, and they'll just target somebody in that stack there. They roll a 5 and they missed. Okay, so now we're on to round 2, or well, ostensibly round 3, because we've already done the gas on round 2. And then once again, the Germans can move up, move up, move up. The artillery gets to shoot 2 shots. They're going to target these guys in the trench works again. Missed again, 5 and a 3. And now, though, the Germans get to attack. Now, this is where I've decided to give the bonus to the defender. The artillery no longer supports the infantry in this version, because it just makes it a lot easier on the math, is that the attackers shoot it at 2. Plus it gives the defender, who is typically going to be lower in number and also putting up with poison gas, gives them a chance to kind of stick around a little bit. Okay. Now probably after that first round, the French... Oh, I guess the French could have moved. Yeah, they would have moved in here, trying to get into those trenches. Okay, so now that the gas is gone, they get into the trenches, right? So now the Germans have moved, and now they can shoot. All right, so they're here within 3, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. They shoot it at 2, but the trench works makes it a 1. All right, so 5 guys shooting, and they need a 1. Oh, look at 3 2s, but no 1s. Okay, same thing here. 5 guys shooting. Oh, they got a 1. So one of the Frenchmen is a casualty. Okay, so casualty, and we'll have a little... You just have to remember who's been hit and where they're at. So maybe you can lay them down. I'm just moving these to the hexes, to the rear spot on the hex, to know that he still gets to shoot. And these guys aren't within 3, so there's no shooting there. Okay, so the French get to shoot their artillery, and they'll shoot at that stack right there. A 6. It's not a French 75, is it? All right, and now we have these 2 guys shooting there, and they shoot at a 3, of course, because they're defending. And they got 1 hit, so 1 German leaves. And then we got 2 guys shooting here, and we got 1 hit, so 1 German leaves. And oh, and the French can move these guys in too, so there's 4 more. Now 1 guy died, so we'll put him back, but we're going to chip this guy out. So we'll say this guy died. Okay, so now we got 4 more, hope you followed that. We got 4 more French infantry shooting at that stack there. Oh my goodness, this is terrible. I got 1 more hit. Okay. So now, that's after like 3 or 4 rounds, or 3 rounds, I guess. And actually, it's really only after 2, because the Germans have only gone up 2 spaces. But now comes a decision time. So the Germans can stand off and blast away with their artillery and blast away with their guys here and hope to hit on 1s. They can move this stack over here and shoot at 1s. But that's not really a good idea, because the defenders are attacking you at double the chance of hitting. Well, not double, sorry, 50% better chance of hitting. So you probably want to get in there and blast away. So the Germans are going to move forward. Oh, but the artillery fires first. Artillery fires first. So they're going to fire here and try to clean this out right here. They got 1 hit. So there's 1 guy left in the trench works. Put him there. Then the Germans will move across. And everybody's going. And so the Germans have 4 here. There's only 1 guy left, and they got a 1. So the last guy is dead. So these 2 guys are dead. And then we got 3 Germans there. Oh, look at that. Another hit. Put that there on the back hex. And there's 5 more coming at you. Oh, and they got another 1. Oh, Germans are shooting well here, but let's see if the French can answer. So the French have their artillery. And the artillery is going to target that right there. Hey, finally got a hit. And then the 2 defending French on this side who are dead. Oh, we got 1 hit. Okay. But now these French are gone. So now this is wide open for the Germans. So in 3 turns they can reach the back line. Unless the artillery can take care of them. There's only 2 of them left. And of course the French can reposition these guys too, come across. But they've got problems. So then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 French left here. And we'll, yeah. I think maybe what I'll do is you can roll all the dice you want, but then you can only target guys within your range. And that'll speed things up a bit. So we're just going to roll the 5 dice. got 3 hits. So they're going to kill that stack. 1, 2, 3 is gone. Right, so they're gone. And then these guys are gone. So the Germans at this point definitely have a stranglehold on the map. Okay, so they're going to move in like that. And they're going to move in like that. And now these two guys can target the artillery because there is only 1 artillery. Now the thing is that if the French bug out on this next turn, then the Germans get this artillery. All right, so that could be worth not attacking. And yeah, there's a good chance that the Germans are going to get to the back row anyway, in which case the Germans get the artillery. So, but we're going to shoot at the artillery just because we can. And they got a hit with it too. So the artillery is going to die this round. And then we've got 5 Germans here attacking the French in the trenches. No hits. They needed 1s. Okay. So the artillery will target there. Got a miss. Defenders aren't rolling too well here. And then there are 3 French left. Attack that stack, of course. Oh, wow. They're not rolling well at all. All right. In most of my games, the Germans get bloodied a bit more than this. Okay, so then the Germans, of course, will come in and move down there. And now we've got them at a 1, 2, and 6. So we got 6 dice. Got to get 1s to hit. The artillery can't focus here or fire now, of course. Ooh, no hits. So the French, they can choose to bugger off here or hit the Germans. And they're going to hit the Germans because the Germans are going to win this next turn anyway. So it might as well kill as many guys as you can. Alright, so 1, 2, 3. 1 hit. That's a pretty hideous rolling. Alright, so then on the last here, the Germans reach the back line, which is the back line. This isn't the back line. This is the back line. And so they reach there, at which point the battle is over and the French have to retreat. So these guys here would go back into Paris. If this were in Burgundy or Picardy, they'd go back into Paris. Okay. And the Germans then would take their surviving units, plus knowing that they had 5 artillery to start the round, get those 5 artillery back and these men and put them onto the board. And they would go on to Burgundy or Picardy, and they would own Burgundy or Picardy right now. Okay, so that is what I've been working on. It's probably got a couple flaws in there that I'm not seeing yet, and these Germans would of course go on to Picardy. So the Germans end up with 5 men, and they get their 5 artillery, which means they essentially sustain 10 losses. The French, and the Germans actually, they killed the artillery. So they sustained 10 losses out of their 20 units, which is about, 10 hits from the French. The French ended up, they had 3 men left they had 12 men and only 1 artillery they lost here. So they got 10 hits as well. So very balanced as far as numbers of hits goes. And the French artillery that was in that zone, there were 3 other French artillery in Picardy or Burgundy. They go back to Paris. They're not considered captured. Okay, so if you have a big stack of artillery and the Germans overrun you, or vice versa, French overrun, you don't lose all that artillery. It retreats back with you. Okay, so that's essentially what I've been working on here. I'll just point the camera up at the areas we've been talking about here. I need a director of photography here. Okay, so what I'm talking about is this zone here, Burgundy and Picardy up here, right? So doesn't include Lorraine, okay, and Marseille and Bordeaux and Brest and Paris, of course. But that's what we're looking at here as an idea. So in the comments below, go ahead and let me know what you think. Let me know also what you think about that Italian being neutral for round one and getting only half their money, but being able to move but not attack anything or move into any non-Italian territory. So let me know what you think about those two things in the comments below. And then we're going to play around to this and, have a good time. All right, I got to go to work. But, hey, enjoy the upcoming war. Okay, so as you have just seen, we'll be employing the map for Burgundy and Picardy attacks. So anytime there's attacks that go into Burgundy and Picardy here, I'm going to do some more playtesting on it, and you'll see the results. But I think that the battle went fairly similarly. There might be a few more casualties on each side. So the Germans got, I think, 10 hits and the French got 10 hits, which might be a little elevated, but not horribly. Plus, if you feel like you're really under duress, you can just choose to retreat. And I think that'll be one of the deciding factors as to whether or not I keep this, because I think the retreat adds something. And I know many of us have worked with retreat options in a number of different Axis and Allies iterations, and I think that that's a very important concept that was ignored for the sake of gameplay, right? But I think that retreating, or redeployment, as it were, is a very important part of modern battle. So we'll see how this goes here, but we're just going to play essentially the out-of-box rules, minus the American one that actually allowed them to go and take over Spain or other neutrals if they wanted to. So America's going to have to stay at home, and we are going to play with the Russian Revolution rule, which works on the side of the Central Powers. But we're also going to play with the Italy is neutral for round one, so they only get $7 to start the game. Austria-Hungary cannot attack them, and we'll see what happens then. Round two, or at the end of round one, Italy will declare war, so at the beginning of round two, Austria-Hungary can then attack Venice, and we'll see how that works. But without any further ado, here we go with Axis and Allies 1914. It's the Great War coming to life. All right. This is very fitting music. The Star Wars Cantina theme from the 1977 film. Hope you're enjoying it. So here we have the first round, and I'm trying a couple of different things here, doing this solo play, and we'll see how it goes. So Austria-Hungary decided to go after Albania right off the hop and failed. They missed by one roll and took 3 casualties. Ouch. They took Serbia though, and only lost, I think, 1. That was pretty good. The rest of the stuff they just kind of positioned. We didn't go into Romania and fight. We didn't go into the Ukraine or anything. So, bit of a tougher Soviet presence right now, but AH also has kept a lot more troops. The build was man and a fighter, or 6 men and a fighter. Over here we have the build-up on the border between Tyrolia and Venice, and that's a bit more historically accurate. They had massive armies there, but of such horrible terrain that more guys died from the environment than they did from each other's artillery fire. Very few skirmishes, but they were very bloody as well. So that's what's happening there. In France, I had the Germans, instead of going into Lorraine, and they typically get whittled down pretty badly and end up contesting the territory anyway. I thought, you know what, we're going to bring over the 11 divisions from Munich and the artillery, and then we're going to punch in, because that'll be a much tougher nut to crack. And knowing that I was going to do that, of course, I retreated the French, so they can save their army for the next round. The Germans did take Holland, and the French did take Belgium. And so a little bit more methodical. On the Eastern Front as well, the Germans only went into Poland with 1 man, because I pulled the Russians back into Belarus, of course, and we'll see how that works out for them. But there's a lot more German units here than there normally are when they go into Poland. not so much a trickle. On the Ottoman side, of course, they took Bulgaria. The Russians, though, came down from Sevastopol into Mesopotamia and took it. Yeah, in one round of combat, and they only lost one thing. So they got, I think they got 4 out of 5 hits and then lost one guy. So, yeah, good for them. The British reinforced a little bit, and the British tried to go into Persia. Got no hits, but they themselves lost one, so we were like, oh, that sucked. But so we put our British build in India, and we're using the out-of-box, so you can build as much as you want in India. In Egypt, yeah, it's just pretty much the same. The Ottomans switched their forces from their infantry anyway, from Transjordan and Smyrna, so they got a bit more facing the British. And down here in Africa, we had a quick victory by the British. They got 2 hits on the German artillery and infantry that were in Angola, but then the Germans got 2 hits on the British. So after I killed both Germans, I thought, uh-oh, the Germans might be gone quickly. But now the British are also out of artillery in Africa, unless they go up to Egypt to grab some. So, but we'll see how that goes. The French, of course, coming around. And the French took Portugal for the easy $2. I had the Germans go sink the British cruiser and transport in 2. And then the French came over and sank the 2 subs, but took a hit on the battleship. And the British and the Germans are having an uneasy standoff. And the British built a submarine here, just to kind of increase their the number of units they have there. So we'll see how that all works out on round 2. We'll see if this Italy thing works out in our version, and see if it's a game breaker or anything like that. I don't think it is, but we'll see how it works today on round 2. Alright, the music, of course, from Raiders, which took place right around this area here. So we'll start down in this corner of the board for this turn 2 synopsis. And as you can see, the British and the Ottomans have been slugging it out here pretty well. The Russians kind of started it, though. And the Turks came in after the British had some stuff in there and got enough hits to kill the Brits, but we kept the Russians in there just for fun. The British were able to take Persia, and of course did a good build in India. And they can't build any ships, in case anybody's wondering, but they do use their ships to go over here and take Arabia. And they also had a little bit of success. The Mesopotamian attack actually failed miserably against the Russians. The British had come into here because nobody was in the Syrian desert, and no Ottomans were in here. The British just kind of walked in, and that was a freebie. But then they died and didn't inflict any casualties. So kind of a poor round of combat for the British Empire. And it's still a standoff across the Suez. And down here in Africa, you may have noticed a British roundel here. I put one here, and then I attacked there and put one there, and I forgot to remove that one. So, yeah, that's still nobody's. But after the Germans kind of took it on the chin last round, they've retreated into Equatorial Africa, and this fellow here has nowhere to go, so he's just going to hang on, and maybe a hole will open up. The French have come across and liberated Nigeria from the Hun, and it's as far as they could go, though, and there was nobody else to get, and you can only offload into one zone, so I figured, well, I'll go here, get back the British money for them next round anyway. The French battle cruiser came across and brought transport. You may have also noticed that I only put a couple of units on for Portugal instead of 4. These things happen when you're going through a whole bunch of different things in your brain. Up here in Romania, the Turks got the last laugh as they were able to wrest control of that as the Russians and Ottomans were fighting over it. Austro-Hungarians took Albania and still lost another man. So the Albanians got 3 hits on the first round and another one on the last. So good for them. Fighting for their pride there. The Russians, as we know, had pulled out of everywhere, and the Germans came in with one. The Russians took it back with a couple, and then the Germans have come in wholesale. And we'll have to wait and see how this develops. The Russians have, as we know, they always have a lot of troops ready to go, but they're taking on essentially an empire and a half, if you want to break down the amount that Austria-Hungary sends towards them, and the amount Germany sends towards them is worth about 1.5 Russias. So we'll see if Russia can hold on long enough here. Here between Austria-Hungary and Italy, this is actually working pretty well. And it's contested, and the Italians have everything in there now. Austria-Hungary will have to feed more troops in. They do have a slight numerical advantage in troops, but the Italians have more armor going right now, so we'll see how that turns out. The French have transported guys over here, knowing, of course, that they can use their transports to come across and force a landing. So the Ottomans are going to have to be wary of that. But because the British do have the battleship, so they could take out, and this will get fixed at the start of the French turn. So they could come over here and force a landing, which is wide open, which obviously their 4 troops would die instantly, but the Austro-Hungarians know that, so they really can't move any of these guys out of here, because they'll just lose the territory then to an easy landing, and then have to fight for it again. On the Western Front, where typically all the fun is, the Germans go into Belgium. They've got about 35 units in there right now. And the French and British together are pretty equal right there. But you can see Burgundy and Lorraine are absolutely empty. So I suspect that Germany will probably just take Lorraine with a single guy to get the couple of bucks and then bring in the troops from behind. Because Germany can bring in more than the French can, but there is a gap of 1 turn because Germany sent a bunch of stuff to Russia. So we'll see. America's just been holding on to her money, so that's why there's nothing getting built over there. So America's sitting on 60 bucks right now. And that's pretty much it. A bit of a stalemate in the North Sea. Nobody wants to blink. Because, yeah, if your navy is gone, that opens up the Atlantic or the North Sea to all these sorts of possibilities. You don't want possibilities. You'd rather have a stalemate. Alright, and maybe Superman will come along and save the day. But we're not sure about that. Alright, so we're on to round 3 here of Axis 1914. Will this be the turn that we use our special battle board in Picardy? Yes, the theme song from A New Hope. And I'm not sure how much hope there is for either side here, but we'll start here in the Middle East again, down by Turkey, the Ottomans, and they lost Mesopotamia in glorious fashion. They had 11 units there, and... is that... oh, no, it wasn't these guys. Actually, maybe it was, yes. I don't know. In one of these battles, either in Ukraine with the Austro-Hungarians or here in Mesopotamia, somebody had 11 units, and they lost 11 units. Boom. And didn't hit back very hard. So, regardless, here the British continue their march towards Constantinople. The French tried an ill-advised landing. Hello, cat. This is my cat, Benson. Yeah. What? Anyway. He's pretty cool. So here we have the Ottomans are getting squeezed a little bit. They're still doing okay for money because although they lost Mesopotamia, they have Bulgaria and Romania. And of course Arabia they took back as the British emptied it in order to take Mesopotamia. But they're definitely going to be on their heels moving forward here, if you can be on your heels moving forward. Over here, the Russians had to take care, I think this might have been the big battle, they had to take care of a monster AH, and they did, and they destroyed it, everybody gone. Unfortunately, though, you can see they had to give up some territory to do that, so you can see that the territories next to Moscow are getting filled, and you know the Russian Revolution, if enough territories are contested around Moscow, or owned by the Central Powers, it'll go into revolution. So we're not far from that right now, geographically speaking. So it's likely that they'll have at least 3 by the end of the German turn. But if the Russians can stave off that sort of thing long enough, perhaps the Allies can do something. Unfortunately, the Italians had to redeploy here backwards, because if you look at what AH has here, and this is kind of what I try to do when I'm Austria-Hungary, you can see that they're done on the Eastern Front, so Germany's kind of on its own. But over here against Italy, what I try to do is get as much artillery out there as I can, and then I build a fighter that I can use over here versus the Italians, because the Italians tend to not build fighters, but I did here, because if this big stack of artillery is shooting at 4s, to say nothing of upgrading the infantry to 3s, the Italians are just going to get zorched so hard, and will probably be out of the game by turn 6. And I mean out, like completely out. So, not really sure how to defend that, except for the Russians hopefully trying to put pressure on, but the Germans have done a good job here. Now, on the Western Front, the Germans made a big attack into Picardy and really took it on the chin. They lost 16 infantry they lost. And the French ended up losing, I believe, 14 infantry. So, the Germans didn't buy any gas or anything like that. But the French spent a little bit on barbed wire and trenches. But now their buy next turn is going to be a bit weaker because of that. So, yeah, we'll see. See if that ends up being a telling feature of the game. And of course, the Americans now here at the end of round 3 are in, so they spent a whole bunch of money on 6 transports, 6 men, and 6 arty. It wasn't the most mathematically perfect way to build for the Americans, but hey, when you're in a hurry, just get her done. Down here in Africa, the Germans tried to take Belgian Congo and lost a guy. It was 3-on-1, and they failed, but the Brits got a hit, and then the Brits moved in, and there was no battle happening there. And brought down some artillery here, knowing that infantry on infantry rarely works out well. French came a little bit closer, and sent their battle wagon over here. And they had, I'm not sure if I talked about it, they tried an attack here with their 3 infantry and artillery from Portugal, and that did not go well. They're from Marseille, I guess is where they were, but started in Portugal. So yeah, that's how the board looks right now. The CP are actually doing quite well. You can see Paris is under some duress here. Rome is definitely in some trouble. And Moscow is in some trouble. Only London and Washington are doing okay. And the Ottomans, yeah, this does not look good for them. I say 3 turns. Unless the British have some hideous die rolling. I don't see the Ottomans lasting more than 3 turns here. They're going to have to do something pretty amazing. Now they're making pretty good scratch right now, so they might be able to survive another 4 or 5 turns, because the British are kind of slow moving right now. So, but we shall see what happens here on turn 4. So tanks can be built now, and the Americans are in the war. And let's see if that has any effect on the current event. All right. So here we are at the end of round 4, and my cat has returned. But we'll take a look here. Africa, just so you know, is completely empty, and of Central Powers, otherwise known as German troops, they're all gone. So it's all just British and French, and with an Italian, who I keep forgetting to move, because does anybody else forget to move this guy ever? If you're just playing a solo game, it's just like, yeah, he's not gonna do anything. So, yeah, well, let's take a look at the Western Front to start this time. And the Germans did not attack this round. They marshaled their forces because the French, I don't know if you can see in there, but the French actually outnumber the Germans now, total troops. The Germans do have more reinforcements coming here than the French do, but not by much. But the Germans did build some tanks. They're the only group to have built tanks this last turn. So this is definitely turning into the typical quagmire that the World War I Western Front was. Here, the Italians had to come south. Austro-Hungarians had taken Is Tyrolia here? What is this? Tuscany. Yeah, Tyrolia is up here. Tuscany. New start with a T. And Tuscany now is firmly in Italian hands, and they've also blocked the way to Rome. So the problem is that opens up the road to Paris for the Austro-Hungarians. So if they go to Piedmont this turn and Burgundy the next, Paris could be under siege from both German and Austro-Hungarian troops. Now the problem with that is, as we run the math, is that if they ignore this Italian stack and start heading that way, the Italians are going to have more stuff than the Austro-Hungarians have, and they'll start heading towards Vienna. So there is a balance to be struck. And that's what's great about this game. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to go over here and in 3 turns I'll win, because there's too many ways to get to your capital. Speaking of trying to get to the capital, the British went into Ankara, it's right here, and got their butts kicked. They actually went in there and had a pretty decent attack to start with, but the Turks had an amazing counterattack, and then on the Turkish turn, they came in and absolutely destroyed all the rest of the British stuff, which wasn't much. I think there was only 5 or 6 units in a plane, but still, it's all gone. And they also wrested control of the Syrian desert, but at the expense of Transjordan. The Brits emptied Arabia and then refilled it. So this is going to be tougher. Plus, the Turks have moved into Sevastopol because the Germans came down and took Ukraine. So this is no longer a sure thing. The Ottomans have surprised me here with their dice rolling for one, but also they're being able to exploit a lot of little things that have happened here. The Germans have pushed in on all sides here, and the Russian Revolution rule is in effect. Russian Revolution rule, I think that's what I said. So at the end of any Russian turn, there's some things that need to happen for the Russian Revolution rule to take effect. One is that 3 territories adjacent to Moscow are controlled or contested by the Central Powers. The second rule is that another territory that is not one of those 3 is controlled by the enemy forces. And it has to be controlled, not contested, so Poland would fit that bill. As would, say, Sevastopol at this point. And then the other one is Moscow is controlled by Russia or contested. So essentially the Russian Revolution rule will never kick in if Germany came straight through and took Moscow, the Russian Revolution doesn't actually happen. It's too late. So Moscow has to be controlled or contested, all right? Controlled by Moscow or controlled by Russia or contested. I know people have tweaked with that Russian Revolution rule and have found marginal success, but we're just going to do the out-of-box for today, which means that on Russia's turn, if they don't do anything, the Russian Revolution is going to kick in. So they have to take probably Livonia, maybe Karelia as well. And then I have a feeling they're going to smash into this stack over here and into the Ukraine, just out of sheer frustration, but also to get some breathing space. But this is all they've got, what you see in the frame. That's all the Russian units on the board. Yeah, it's true. And so, my cat's getting his word in. Over here, we talked about the Western Front, but we didn't talk about the North Sea. Those British boats are actually new because the Germans came in and sank everything, so you'll see that the British transports no longer exist. So what that means is of course, the British need to rebuild, and the French and British on the continent have to hold on until that gets done. The Americans came over here to Morocco. The build that I did last round, I kind of did the wrong build. So I redid the math and everything and put it all on. It was fine to have this stuff sitting there, but I couldn't have built that much. So there's some more stuff that got built this round. So we are on to round 5 now, and we will see what goes on. Once again, my cat wanting to be a movie star. Yeah, I know. You just got to be kind of... I'm just filming. Okay. All right. So that's it for the wrap up for turn 4. Turn 5's coming on. We'll see if the Italians can hold on in the face of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Alright, well, turn 5 has held some very interesting moments, and Africa remained boring. But in the Middle East here, the Turks punched out a little bit, and it didn't go real well for them. And so, yeah, the British continue to hold some territory here, and they've been able to bulk up Transjordan. It was emptied, you remember, for the Ottomans to take that back. But then the French, cheeky as they are, came up here and took it. And a buck is a buck, right? The British continued to build here, but not as many, because they had to build some ships up north. We'll talk about that. The Ottoman continued to head out and capture territories. If the Ottoman weren't down by 5 here, they'd be up by 10, but they're only up by 5. But that's pretty good for the Ottoman, but you can see they've paid for it in blood. They don't have an awful lot left. So we're heavy on the men and artillery. But a lot of that's being paid for by their holdings outside their own territory. The Americans have landed here. Oh, I forgot to remove these guys. So they landed here and killed both the Austro-Hungarians, and the Austro-Hungarians got a single hit back, so that's why there's only 5 men. But that's a concern to Austria-Hungary. As is this. Austria-Hungary moved everybody over to Piedmont, and they were threatening France, so the French moved in here instead of up to... They moved into Burgundy instead of up into Picardy, so that takes some pressure off the Germans. So it looked like it was going to work, and then the Italians rushed up to take some territory from, or not some territory, but to put the boots to Austria-Hungary. Now, the battle didn't go real well for the Italians, but it sure blunted the Austro-Hungarian forces, and yeah, we'll see if this is enough. Now, over here in Russia, things are getting really interesting. The Germans attacked into Moscow and failed, of course, but the idea was to tie up some Russian forces and whittle them down, and they killed 2, maybe, I think. 1 or 2. I guess just 1. But the Austro-Hungarians are going next, and they have a force here. If they get some lucky dice, they might actually be able to capture Moscow this round. If they don't, then obviously the Russians are going to retreat their stack back into Moscow and build. But hot on their heels, we have another dozen German units. So Moscow is definitely on a clock. Over here, the British, as I had mentioned, built some ships, so they built up some 2 transports and a sub, and the Germans still only have a beat-up battleship, which will get repaired this turn. The Americans brought some more guys over here to Africa and built a meager force on the other side of the Atlantic. But that's pretty much it for round 6. The Ottoman are feeling a little bit more comfortable now, but not horribly so. They're not feeling great, because now you got these Americans who are going to start gobbling up territory. The only way to stop that is for Austro-Hungarians to attack them and try to tie down their forces, which of course they could do, but then the Austro-Hungarian forces are fighting Americans when they should be fighting Italians and Russians. So we'll see how that works out. The Germans again built some more tanks. Right now they've got a dozen of them on the board, and likely heading into France. The thing about Russia, if you've played this game a lot, you probably know that if you can beat up on Russia for a while like this, you don't even have to take it out of the game. It's just, you know, it's not going to be really relevant, especially if the British are unable to help. And the British right now are unable to help. So I think Germany will continue to head stuff west. All right. We'll let you know how turn... Did I say turn 6? So turn... at the end of turn 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I guess we're going on to turn... At the end of round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess we're going on to round 6 now. That was turn 5. Too tired. All right, we'll let you know how it goes in just a moment. All right, so round 6 is in the books here, and some Pirates of the Caribbean theme music going on. Some interesting things happened, and we'll walk you through it right now. So in the Middle East, the Ottomans, the resurgent Ottomans, have gotten back some land here. The Brits were here. They escaped so that they could win this fight, which they did, but then the Ottomans came in with their reinforcements, so it's contested again. French and British continue to build up in Transjordan. Let's see here. Yeah, the Ottomans had to pull out of here. The British liberated Sevastopol. Yeah, so that's a good thing for the Russians, although it may not save them. Ottomans continue to be pesky, but they had to pull back from Romania into Bulgaria. The Americans, kind of looks like the stacks there, sent a single guy into Serbia to free them from the clutches of the evil Austro-Hungarian Empire. Russia is down to Moscow here, and at the end of their turn, if this is what it looks like again, then they will go into the Russian Revolution mode. So obviously they've got to strike out and capture some stuff, and we'll see how they do. Could take a shot at this because the only other German is up here in Livonia, so I think we'll probably come out here and hammer this Belarusian stack now that the British have been able to send some stuff up here, which blunted the British drive on Constantinople, of course, but what can you do? Getting into the Ottomans' income will pay off, I think. Austro-Hungarians had to send a bunch of stuff south here to deal with the Americans. And let's see here, in Italy, the French came in and had an attack. It was fairly ill-advised. They didn't have much punch, and they lost 4 guys doing it. But they took off a couple of artillery and some infantry from the Austro-Hungarians. The Italians did not attack this round. Merely stocked up some guys and bought a fighter to help that big stack of artillery have some fun. So the Austro-Hungarians may attack, hoping to whittle down the artillery in the zone, but I think that would be pretty ill-advised. We'll see if Austria-Hungary has the wherewithal to take care of these Americans. That would be... I think they'd probably lose that fight, so we'll see. We'll see. They do have a fighter, though, which we bought, knowing that this would probably happen on this round. The Germans are moving some stuff east as well as west. Again, very quiet on the Western Front. All's quiet, so the book was right. Germans, of course, repaired their battleship, and their cruiser are there in 10 now. Like I say, the French came down through Burgundy and into Piedmont to help the Italians. And yeah, that's going pretty well there for the Allied powers. You kind of get that gut feeling like you know how things are going to go, and it really looks good for the Entente right now, for the Triple Alliance as they're called, and the Central Powers are kind of, yeah, it's going to be interesting. But if Germany can do something with this force, they're outnumbered by the French and English, so that's the problem. So punching into there, even if they go onto that map, it might not work out too well. So maybe they will and employ a whole bunch of poison gas and maybe try to whittle down the numbers and then take off. I don't know. We'll have to see. And again, folks, I'm just developing those rules, so I'll take any comments you may have. Doesn't mean I'll actually implement the changes, but I'll definitely listen to them, and it'll help me make it a better experience for everybody in the future. Okay, well that's pretty much it. There's not much else going on. It's turning into a pretty static war, actually. Africa, as we know, is all done. The Middle East, typically we're only fighting over Mesopotamia these days. There's a slight creep into Russia from the south. Moscow's, as we know, the Russians have backed off into Moscow, and this has become a bit of a stalemate as well. So nobody can seem to get the upper hand, which of course you don't do when you're rolling 2s and 3s, and you only get 1 round of combat. So, but we'll see what happens here on turn 7 of Axis and Allies, 1914. Alright, some very dramatic music here for the wrap-up of round 7. And yeah. Yes, it's the end of round 7, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Middle East here. So the Ottomans, who were at the height of their power a couple turns ago, have kind of taken it on the chin here, but they're doing what they can to mess things up. But they did lose Sevastopol to the British last round, and Tatarstan to the British this round, but then they've decided to come up here and did an attack, and they both missed, so at least that's one territory that's contested. And so the Russians have to take that into account, because if Russia doesn't actually do something here, if the Germans come in, so they've got to be careful. And yeah, we'll see what happens there. But the Ottoman Empire is slowly collapsing in on itself. It's taking a lot of pressure. You even got the French over here taking some of their territories. And with the Americans landing here and actually moving up and taking Trieste, the Ottoman Empire's got problems. Now, there's a chance they should be able to wipe this out, especially having air superiority and some tanks, but yeah, it's not looking good for them. And the Americans are still funneling things over here. They've only got 4 units coming here, but in the next couple rounds they'll have 6 more coming. So they did drop off a man and a tank here, but it's highly likely that the Ottoman the AH are going to retreat out of Italy and back home to deal with this American threat, and then expand out again. They do have decent money. They've got like $33 to spend next round, so it's not like they're broke or anything. Plus the Russians are putting no pressure on Austria-Hungary, so Austria-Hungary is sending everything west and now south. Speaking of Russia, they were able to punch out into Belarus. They didn't kill everything. I guess this has got to come off because Russia took it back after the Germans vacated. So when the Germans left, the Russians obviously didn't have troubles, but the Germans are likely going to move right back in because they've got 6 tanks there. As you know, on the offense, tanks absorb a hit, so that's 6 hits that these Russians here would have to forfeit, and they're not going to get too many more than 6. So it might be an idea, possibly, I don't like it, but it might be an idea for the Russians to actually attack this stack, because the tanks do not get that hit absorption on defense. But then you can see right behind is another 6 tanks, so it's a good chance. Well, we'll see. We'll see. The Russians are going to be able to claim some of their land back. They'll have a healthier economy, so it might be just a delay tactic. As we saw here, the Austro-Hungarians are pretty low on stuff. They're a spent force in Italy. That the dream of walking down the Champs-Élysées was far-fetched at best. But here, the Germans came south into Lorraine, and is that Lorraine? Yeah, it's Lorraine. And the French had to respond by coming down into Burgundy. Now, for the absolute numbers of what are on here, the French have more, but the Germans have more artillery. So it's going to actually come down to who wins the air battle, and they both have 2 fighters. So when the Germans come into this, if they win the air battle, and the French don't have any fighters left, that'll be kind of telling. Plus, we're gonna play it on the that little map, right? And so if the Germans are able to maybe flood one side and get to the other side before the French can get their troops moved around, and maybe the gas could come in handy next round, right? So we'll see. There are some options for the Germans, and the French may end up having to retreat into Paris and Cocoon. But on the Channel coast, it's all allies, all day, every day. So the Germans may have to use these tanks to go punch into that stack there. But we'll see. A few options here. The British continue to build up their merchant fleet, and they actually sent one over there because they didn't have enough stuff to send to France. So, but now they're going to get a steady stream of guys coming across. Not much in India going on, just a minor build this time. That's pretty much it. There's not much else to be said. Austria-Hungary has some problems. If they can't deal with these problems and just kind of wash their hands of it all on this attack, they're going to be in some trouble. Even a little trickle of French help could be the difference, a little bit of American help. And we'll see what happens here on turn 8, Axis and Allies, 1914. Very dramatic music. So this was the total of 2 battles on the outskirts of Paris, and the French lost the first one decisively and then won the second one, well, pretty decisively. But we'll get to that in just a minute. Over here in the Middle East, Ottoman were able to take back Ankara after the British came in and made it contested. But as you can see, they're getting pretty thin here, and they only have for next round. Well, I guess they got $16 to spend next round, so not quite 6 men anymore. They've lost all of their holdings in Russia, so they were able to get Bulgaria back, although it cost them an artillery to do so. So they actually lost $1 on that, and we'll see if they can hold it. The Italians continue to bring stuff over, but the Austro-Hungarians were able to destroy the American contingent down to the last man, and did it with authority. As you can see, the 3 tanks were able to absorb 3 hits, and I think the Americans got like 7 or 8 hits. So the Austro-Hungarians are large and in charge on their own territory, but they actually have lost Tyrolia to the Italians because the Austro-Hungarians left one guy behind in Venice to keep it contested, and the French came in, killed him, and so the Italians were free to go. So they actually have a decent amount of money to spend next turn. They're up around, they're going to have $22 to spend next turn. So that's pretty good for them. Might even buy a plane again. The Americans landed here. There was thoughts of going here, but that's all just going to get taken away again. So go here, build up a little bit of a force. They've got more stuff coming. In Russia, the Russians punched out from Belarus into Poland and destroyed a good chunk of the stack here, but missed 1 man and 1 tank. And the Germans came back in, and yeah, the Russians got, I think, 6 hits or something, but the Germans have 7 tanks. So no damage was done to the Germans, and there's 6 more tanks coming behind. So that would be 13 hits that wouldn't apply going forward. So I think the Russians will be going backward and rebuilding up in Moscow. They were able to get the rest of their territories back, though, so they're doing a little bit better financially. They're going to have $23 to spend next round. They saved some. But, yeah, we'll see. Austria-Hungary really only has a bit of a blocking force there. They have no intentions of going east. Everything's got to go west now. So, but here, this is where we stand now. Is in Burgundy. The Germans came in and took Burgundy. The French got gassed, and got gassed hard. The Germans, if you look at the German build this last round, pretty meager, because they spent money on 5 poison gas tokens, and with the 5 poison gas tokens, they took out almost all that you see here. Very little is from the French attack. The Germans pretty much just withdrew from the contest, so the poison gas went through and just killed so many guys. And then the Germans were headed for the French back lines, and the French didn't want to start losing things, so they just retreated back into Paris and then launched their counter-offensive. Personally, folks, I'm really liking this system where the Burgundy and Picardy can actually be taken and held. You don't just have your 1 round of combat. You can actually go through and push somebody out of there. But hey, I'm biased, of course, but I just thought I'd try it out and see how it works. And it seems to work out well for the attacker. That poison gas is really handy stuff. Now, of course, if your poison gas fails and you get caught up in barbed wire and whatnot, and your trench works aren't working, yeah, that can happen. But I think the odds are with the attacker if you put the money into the poison gas. But again, that took like $25 out of the German coffers, so they were not able to build very much this round. But they sure destroyed an awful lot of French stuff. They killed a lot more than what the cost of the gas was. And that's kind of the point. Gas is pretty cheap compared to what it can really do, especially back in those days. And especially before the good masks were invented. The British had designs on possibly going in here in the future, so we went to go kill the German Navy and utterly failed. And we lost, the British lost a submarine to the mines, and then the Germans got one hit, and the British got no hits on the German battleship or cruiser. So, yeah, did not go well for the British. Hoping to land, I thought, might be able to land behind German lines here, and, this will be it for Germany. That's all they have up here, but it didn't work out. Now, the British did force a landing in Belgium and whittled the Germans down to some pretty meager troops. But we'll see what happens in the next round to see if the Germans are able, because the Germans can skedaddle out of there, which they likely will, and reinforce if they can. But the British have a lot of stuff there. They've got 5 infantry and 5 artillery, so that's pretty much it. The Americans, of course, have their kind of bridge going here, pretty close. And yeah, not much else to say about round. What was that? Round 8. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That was round 8. So we're getting on to round 9 here. The Russians look a little freer, but as you know, they don't have much left to keep their country safe. But the Austro-Hungarians got their own problems. Got some Italians coming in here, and the French on their heels, and then the Americans. So 1, 2, 3 punch. All right, we'll see what happens on turn 9 in just a moment. All right, well, welcome back. And when you design your own game system, especially when there's an existing one around it, there's always going to be hiccups. And I ran into one here today, but I'll get to that in just a minute. So down here in the Middle East, things are pretty much status quo. Neither side had enough to go take out the other side. So Constantinople just marshaling its forces. Italy didn't move. Austria-Hungary went up and are now fighting over Venice again, and kind of put a halt on the Italians up top, so they'll probably all be dead this round. But the Italians had a good round and had like $22 to spend last round, so they got some men and artillery and a fighter to hopefully help them against the Austro-Hungarians. Over here in Russia, the Germans, of course, destroyed the lone infantrymen in Poland, and the Russians pulled back, built a fighter because they got decent artillery. They got like 9 artillery here. And I'll tell you, when you're rolling 4s, it can be devastating. So they're hoping that they can salvage something there. But again, they're doing better. They definitely have a few more rounds of life in them. But up here, the Germans are really hurting. The British have expanded out and are liberating things like Holland. They took the Ruhr and everything. And the Germans all pushed into Burgundy from Picardy. Now here's the thing that kind of wrecks my game system a little bit. I'll be the first to admit it, because I went to play it and I went, oh, that's not going to work. Burgundy was empty, by the way. Nobody was in there. Or were there? There could have been a few French in there. I think the French pretty much. There could have been a few French in there, but the Germans went in, and I didn't even set up the battle as such. I just rolled a couple dice, and it was obvious that the Germans were gonna to win. But the thing is that without infantry, if you don't have a good stack of infantry, fighting in Burgundy and Picardy is a lost cause. As the defender, especially, because he'll just hit you with his artillery until you're dead. But also, as the attacker, you need to have scores of infantry, because if the defender's artillery is hitting you before you can get to the back line, then that's not gonna do well for you. So you can only have 1 artillery as the defender and 2 artillery as the attacker. And we know that you have to have at least 1 infantry in every zone that you have other units in. You can't have a tank by itself or an infantry or artillery or fighter by itself. There has to be other things. And I screwed up on that this game with the British down here, where I had a couple of British artillery left, and it was a total brain fart, and I thought I'd leave it there just to show you. It should be that. That should be what is left there. I took off the infantry instead of the artillery when I had those battles. So I thought I'd just shame myself by doing that on camera. But it happens every now and again, right? You just like, oh yeah, take off the infantry and keep the expensive stuff. But yeah, you just can't do that. So back to this conundrum here, is that when you get down to using this map, if you have kind of bled off your army of all of its infantry, there's a good chance you're going to lose. So if the other guy has massed infantry and you've only got 3 or 4 infantry and you're trying to go into one of these territories, there's a chance you're going to lose because his artillery might pick off your infantry before the gas picks off your infantry. And that's kind of what happened in this thing. Germans bought a couple of gas and did some severe damage again. And then the French just retreated because they were getting pretty thin and all the gas hadn't even been launched yet. So that's just kind of how I'm looking at it. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if maybe I should tweak the rules there a little bit. But please just don't say, oh, I don't like it or I love it. That's not constructive. Tell me why. And I'm really I'm looking for some informed opinions here. So if you've played this game a lot and you understand what they tried to do with the one round, and I'm just trying to spice it up a little bit. I'm looking for those. Also, initially I'd moved into Picardy with the German guys out of Lorraine. I moved everybody into Picardy, and then what happened was on the French turn they stepped into Lorraine, and now the German unit is entirely cut off, and all the French have to do is attack. And the Germans can't retreat, and they can only have their infantry and 1 artillery there. And the French are hitting them with a huge stack. And I thought, well, shoot. That's not good, because to retreat, you have to obviously retreat to a place that you own. And so the Germans were pretty hooped. So that's why I made the little switch and had them go into Burgundy instead. I kind of had to rewind a little bit, because as I went to set up the board, I looked to see where the Germans might retreat to, and there was nowhere to go. Because the British owned Belgium, and the French had owned Lorraine. So I pulled the French out of there. The British took Lorraine on their turn, as you can see. But right now, the Germans have nowhere to retreat to. So if they don't attack Paris this round, or go take Picardy or something, they have nowhere to retreat to. So I think that's an important concept, though. So I kind of like that part. That you can have this great big stack, but it can get wiped out completely, utterly. So you do have to be a bit careful about your supply lines. And essentially that's what in retreating and pretty much every war game is all about, is that you're getting closer to your supply lines. And if you got nowhere to go, you're cut off, well then you better raise the white flag or it's going to be over. Stalingrad, I'm looking at you. Up here, I was so thinking about the thing. I put the battleships in the wrong spot. So the German cruiser and battleship took care of the injured British battleship and 2 subs, but they lost their cruiser. And the British built a couple of battleships to protect their fleet of transports here. So that's important. The Americans, the British on their turn loaded up on the American transport. These are the Canadians. And then the Americans moved, and of course they can't do anything until their turn, but at least it's 6 more units that'll be coming around here. They're not really needed up here right now because, well, they can't get to Paris on time to help, so if Paris falls this round, so be it. But they might be able to come here and shore up the defense or cause grief for the Austro-Hungarians here. But this, to me, this is a very interesting game. So Paris is really under the guns of the Germans. The British are having some success on the coast here. They can't go much further, of course, because Germans have a ton of reinforcements coming. The Russians have held off the Germans here on the Eastern Front, but the Germans now have 11, 12, 13, 13 tanks. Okay? But again, they don't get their hit absorption on defense, and the Russians have like 11 units plus a fighter that might be able to hit them in Poland. So the German, this is very interesting to me. Russia took Galicia because, well, they could. So that's, yeah, that's pretty much how things are going right now. But I'm very intrigued. I want to see how this turns out. I'm very, very intrigued. I think the Germans have, I don't know if they have a numerical superiority. I think what's going to happen here is whoever wins the air battle, I think will win the battle for Paris. Yeah, I think if the Germans win the air battle, they're going to have a whole bunch of fours, like 21 or 22 fours that they're going to be rolling. And the French are defending at threes, so at about the same number. So it's going to be interesting. Plus the Germans have one tank, which will give them one hit absorption, but obviously that's not great. But the Germans do have two fighters, and the French only have the one. In Italy, we have quite the multinational thing going on here. We've got Italians, Americans, French, all fighting against the Austro-Hungarians. We'll see how that goes. The American battleship and come in here and got beat up, so it came back here. Last turn got repaired. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. All right, so we'll see at the end of, let's see here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Hey, welcome to turn 10. We're in double digits, and we'll let you know how it goes. We'll see if Paris falls this round or not. All right. Well, some places really had changes and others really didn't. So we'll look at the places that didn't. So still just some building up that's going on here. And thought I'd build some tanks here in Britain. I think that might help break the deadlock over here. Not in Britain, sorry, in India. This might break the deadlock for the UK. Just can't seem to bring enough stuff up to match what the Ottomans are building and have in reserve. So, but it's good. Never know. Dice go ice cold or get red hot. Never know. Americans brought over the British and landed a bunch of their own stuff up here. This is a mess. I apologize for that. They got like 4 different loads of guys they've dropped off there, but the Ottomans were able, or the AH, pardon me, were able to take control of Venice, and Piedmont is wide open. They also were able to take Galicia back, of course. They used a tank, so they took no hits from the single Russian infantry. The Russians got wiped out, and the Germans did not go in. Essentially, they need more infantry support. If they don't get the infantry support, then this will actually defeat them, because tanks just defended a 1. And you don't want to send in that stack there, because they'll wipe them out. So, could be bad. Plus, Russians have a couple of shiny new tanks. Look at that. Over here in Italy, like you saw, the Italians and the Americans are a bit of a stopgap there. You may have noticed last round that I had my new build in Rome with red chips. Oops. In Germany, things are looking pretty bleak for the Germans all of a sudden. Here in Germany proper, they've actually lost $17 worth of their own money. Now, of course, they're going to have some of that back, because the Austro-Hungarians will take Munich back and put a decent force probably in Alsace, or towards Alsace, and then start punching across. Don't know if it'll be too little too late, though. The battle did not go real well for the Germans. The French actually got more hits on the Germans, and which is unfortunate for the Germans. They might be out of time here. So the French actually built 2 fighters and a few artillery, counting on winning the air battle, and then the Germans are shooting at 3s, and the French can defend at 4s, so with their artillery anyway, of which they have many. So I think that might be it for the Central Powers, because Germany, we'll see. There's still a lot to be played here. Now, I said we're playing out-of-box rules, which we are. We, meaning me. But in other videos, I've played a house rule that we've played where the tanks get their damage absorption on the attack or the defense, which in my mind makes a little bit of sense historically, but I understand why they don't do it in the gameplay. But when we play it in gameplay, people tend to use their tanks a whole lot more. See, in this situation, this actually stopped the advance of the Germans in, because if they go in here with their stack of tanks, well, they defended a 1, they don't get damage absorption, and so you need to keep a steady flow of infantry to support the tanks. Now, of course, that's historically accurate, but I think it kind of slows down the gameplay a little bit and causes a bit too much of a quagmire, but hey, personal opinion. But we'll see what happens here. I think the Central Powers need to have something really good happen really soon, or else this game will be lost to the pages of history. Alright, we'll see if Austria-Hungary can make some noise here on round 11. Alright, so here we are at the end of round 11. And the Ottomans have decided to retreat as best as they could, and left a couple of guys in Smyrna hoping to stave off the powers that be. At that point would just be the Italians, but the Americans, I thought, well, let's go do a landing over here just to kind of mess things up a little bit, and we'll see how that works. But the Ottoman retreated from Ankara and have built up quite a force here in Constantinople, far greater than what the British can bring at this time. So they'll just keep plowing in there and then eventually be able to sally forth, but we shall see. America landed 6 dudes there in Albania just to shore that up. Over here, kind of an interesting thing. So the Austro-Hungarians went into Ukraine and took that unopposed. And the Russians didn't attack, and there's a reason for that. That's because all the Germans you see here were actually in Poland, and they would have crushed the Russians there, especially because they've got 9 tanks. So on the attack, it's a pretty formidable force. On defense, not so much. But the Russians would probably be loath to attack this as well by the time their turn comes around, because most of this Austro-Hungarian stuff is going to be in Ukraine. So it's going to be an interesting finish here in Russia, if it does finish. Over here, the Italians have been able to regain their land, and with some help, of course, from, you see, the British, the French, and the Americans. So all but the Russians, as far as the alliance goes, have made it to northern Italy and are helping staunch the flow. And the Austro-Hungarians went into Munich, took that with authority, and Alsace is now empty as the British moved in. The Germans had a pretty good attack into the Ruhr and beat up the Brits pretty good, but also got a bit of a bloody nose themselves. But now they're following it up with some tanks, so we'll see how that goes. British built a couple of subs and are likely, we're going to see if we can't do some sort of a landing in Hanover, because there are no artillery there, or not in Hanover, pardon me, in Kiel, because there are no artillery there, but we shall see. In Paris, which you've all been waiting for, yeah, the Germans inflicted some decent casualties, but also lost, and they actually lost 1 or 2 more than the French did. So I think the German thrust at Paris has failed for now, but if they take Russia, then it's something that they might be able to put on their to-do list later on. The Americans continue to build and get their transport fleet going, bringing things over. They landed the British in Piedmont, and that was on those 3 transports. But beyond that, things, that's pretty much it. Not a lot of action down here. Not a lot of fighting going on here. This was a pretty one-sided, lopsided battle, as the Austro-Hungarians took Trieste from the Americans, and with some authority. And that's pretty much it. Alright, so that's it for round 11. We're going to do round 12 here. If Russia falls this round, or is close to falling this round, Central Powers will have some hope. But if the Russians can hold out and they don't fall to the big horde that you see here, then I think it's going to be an Allied victory going home. We'll let you know right away. Alright, one question has been answered, and the Parisians have fought off the Germans. The Kaiser's troops have slunk back home in retreat, but they did liberate the Ruhr, and more importantly in my mind, they actually got rid of the British fleet. So the 2 subs and 2 battleships came into Sea Zone 10. There were 2 German battleships. The mines got 2 hits, 1 on a sub and 1 on a battleship. So now we're down to 1 sub and 2 battleships, one of whom is wounded, versus 2 healthy German battleships. So the British got 2 hits, so that made both battleships tilt, and then the Germans got 2 hits, which tilted the next battleship and killed the subs. So now we have 2 damaged battleships versus each other, and you can see what happened. So that's why the British transports are way the heck over there, because they're not going to sit in Sea Zone 9. Is that German battleship will repair, and then you can move in and just kill them all. So, had to do that. But France is safe for the time being, although the Austro-Hungarians are likely going to take Lorraine, possibly Belgium, so the Germans don't have to fight, but they both have good stacks of tanks there. The multinational force in northern Italy is very strong, and the Italians went and took Tyrolia, although they won't keep it, of course. The Austro-Hungarians defeated the 6 American infantry and took no damage because they had 3 tanks, and the Americans got 2 hits. So, kind of stymied that. Over here in Constantinople area, the Ottomans have definitely gone full turtle. There's really nothing they can do offensively. So now it's just going to be the inevitable grind down until they're gone. Now, they can possibly be saved if the Austro-Hungarians send some stuff over, but it won't be there for 3 turns, and I'm not sure that they're going to last 3 turns. But they might. They do have a lot of guys there. They've got about 33 units or something, so might be taken care of by then, but never know. Everything else is just kind of marching along here, but the British may actually head north here because the Russians are kind of in a bad way. The Austro-Hungarians charged in there just with some infantry, hoping that they would survive to tie down the Russians, but they didn't. But because they were able to bring such a large crew, and the Germans had a good crew there, it didn't make any sense for the Russians to go out, and so they're going to get hit pretty hard the second time, and it's unlikely they'll kill all the invaders this time, and then they'll be tied into Moscow. Really, they wouldn't want to venture forth, but we'll see how that goes. That's pretty much it for the wrap up. I already showed you the up north. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So really what we have going on now is we have the battle along the northern route here. We've got what is fairly inevitable in this game is a big pile up here in northern Italy. We've got Moscow under siege and Constantinople hiding behind its walls, which didn't work out for it. What was that, 600 years ago, 500 years ago, when the Turks brought the big guns and blew up the walls of Constantinople? Well, yeah, so this might not work for them, but we'll see. They might have more luck, and we'll find out on turn 13. Alright, round lucky 13 is in the books, and here we go. So not much change here, except that the Brits have moved forward into Ankara. Took that $3. Actually, they did that last time, but they didn't move in because I wanted to get the tanks going, and before we do the big attack. So there's, 5 tanks there that are going to absorb the first 5 hits that the Turks get. So we'll see how that goes. The Americans made a landing here and took that back with some authority. They peeled off a lot of their forces from up top, 10 units, but they had enough to do another shot into Trieste as well. Actually, it's not 10 units, it was only 4 units because the other 6 came from over here with their steady stream of fellows coming across here. And that one went very well. The Austro-Hungarians only got one hit on, or two hits, but one got absorbed by the tanks. So there you go. Austro-Hungarians, though, have quite a large force here that could smash both of these, so we'll see what happens. This force here may have to turn around and try to deal with that, although I think they're a little outclassed there. So they may just continue on, hoping to help the Ottoman Turks out. In Moscow, the foray of the Austro-Hungarians ended in disaster. They survived their assault, but they didn't survive the counterattack. So the Germans poured into there and really did some damage. And the Russians did no damage to the Germans because their tanks, 9 of them, absorbed the hits. I think they got 7 hits back. So yeah, that doesn't help. The Germans also decided to take some territory around. So what we have now is a possible Russian revolution on this round 13, because there are 3 adjacent territories to Moscow that are under CP control. There's another one, Poland, which is under CP control, and Moscow is Russia controlled or contested, and at this point it's contested. So even if they win and get all the hits they need, they cannot liberate this area. They simply cannot do it by their turn. So the Russian Revolution is going to be kicking in here this round. That's it for Russia. And I had the Brits sitting here and I was going to send some up, and then I looked at it and I said, no, they can't help. They can't help. Russia is beyond help at this point. So, yeah, that's too bad, because Russia was actually starting to do okay, but when they did not get rid of these Germans on their assault, that was the death knell. So that stack of tanks, it's only 9, but that stack of tanks did it for them. So the Russians will be done, and that just essentially means nobody can take any more of their territory. You can hold the stuff you have, of course, but you cannot take any more of it. And you need to vacate all your guys off their land, except for the infantry. You don't need to, but you just get rid of all your guys, get them off their land. And you can use them elsewhere, perhaps, to save your Ottoman friends. Let's see how things are going up here. Big mess, big schmoz. Remember how empty that was on the end of last turn? Well, the Austro-Hungarians moved in from Alsace, the Germans moved in from the Ruhr, and they ended up taking Belgium back, the Germans did. And so the French are here, the British landed some troops, French battleship came up to lend some protection, and the British built 2 battleships because I'm just sick and tired of having to worry about the transports. And this way, they're pretty much guaranteed unless Germany decides it found some money and can build more battleships. But the French are starting to lose territory again, so as their economy starts to dip down, maybe the Germans, who no longer have to send anything east, are going to be a problem. So we shall see what happens here, though. On turn 14, a steady stream of Americans is certainly helping put pressure on Austria-Hungary, but it hasn't broken them by a long shot. And yeah, we'll just see what the Austro-Hungarians have up their sleeves on turn 14. And we'll see if the Turks can survive one more round. Alright, well, of course, the big news, which isn't really news if you've been watching up to this point, is the Russian Revolution happened, and so I just put a big marker out there to remind myself. And the Germans decided to scuttle southward. Now the rules is that Central Powers can no longer go onto Russian territories. But it doesn't say anything about the Alliance Powers not going on, which is kind of weird because that's kind of what the Russians said. They basically told everybody to get out, and that's why the Russian Revolution went down a couple years after that with the Red Army and the White Army. But we'll just do the out-of-box rules here, and we'll see what happens. The British slammed into Constantinople and took a big chunk out of her, and the Turks did not fight back this round. They just collected their $9 and away you go. But there's just such a steady stream of British stuff coming here, and they'll have a plane in there to bulk up all those artillery. There's a good chance Istanbul is going to fall before any help can arrive. Meanwhile, the Americans have actually punched right into Vienna and have made that a contested territory. So it's quite probable that the Austro-Hungarians will take it back, but they are definitely feeling the pressure here. Big stack of Italians coming here, even some pesky French. So maybe sending their troops up here wasn't the smartest idea, although it did help the Germans out quite a bit, softening up things before they got there. Good chance to have a tilt pretty soon here on the little map, and we'll see what happens with that. Germans are just, they don't have the concern over here, so that's nice that they can now bring things back. But I think the clock is ticking on the Central Powers, as it always does in this game, but it's taken a little longer this game, so I'm liking the two changes I made, the Italian change and using this special map for a couple of territories. I can already hear it. Some people are probably saying, Belgium, you should have it in Belgium, because Belgium is where most of the trenches were dug and all the rest. And you know, you're not wrong that Belgium, there was a lot of action there, but also in France. So historically, I could honestly put that map on every single spot in France, and even some of the stuff in on the Eastern Front, and definitely in Venice, because good grief, that was a mess. But I don't want to slow the game down too much, and I'm trying to make it so that it's just the places adjacent to Paris that are going to be affected by that. So, but again, I welcome your thoughts, but we got to get moving here. We're on to turn 15, and we'll probably see the end of Constantinople this turn. It's likely that the Ottoman will fall, in which case the British will just swarm up here. If Constantinople falls on the British turn, we're going to call it. The only way I won't call it is if the Austro-Hungarians and the Germans can punch through into Picardy here and take control of Picardy. Because if they take control of Picardy, Paris is right there, and of course, depending on what they have left, they might be able to threaten Paris. So that's my caveat here. We're going to see how that goes up north. And if it goes pretty well, we'll see what happens down here. All right. Well, good luck to the Turks. They're going to need it. Well, the Ottoman continue to defy all odds, but this is their death knell. They're going to be done here in a moment. And the Americans actually busted out and were able to collect $36 this turn. And so they're going to have a lot of stuff to buy next round. Austro-Hungary was able to get rid of the problem in one spot, but as you can see, others have cropped up. Now, we're going to have to still play a little bit longer, because the Germans had an amazing time up here. Austria-Hungary did a really good job taking care of things, and then the Germans were able to follow it up before the French could reinforce. Basically, the British took all the hits from the Austro-Hungarians, and the French ended up taking a couple. So and it's like any other situation when you have multinational forces. They all go on that little map, but you know, the artillery can target, the gas can target. So sometimes you don't get to choose what you want. And so I set it up a little historically, where I put the French all together and the British all together, but there weren't as many British, and they got hammered hard. And then the Austro-Hungarians pretty much wiped them out, and then the Germans came along and finished the job and took out, or made it to the, it looked like they were going to make it to the edge, so the French just decided to skedaddle. And yeah, that's pretty much what happened there. The French being a little cheeky here, but all these things are going to die. The British did force a landing in Holland, But they lost a transport along with a man and an arty doing it, and 2 hits on the battleships because the Germans did all right in defense. Yeah, so we're just going to do a little bit more here. We might not complete this round. We'll probably go until Constantinople. But the Germans are going to attack Paris. I don't give much for their chances. The Germans are outnumbered about 3-1, so I don't think they're gonna. They certainly won't wipe everybody out because they mathematically can't. But I just don't see them having the horses right now, and yeah, just too much other bad stuff going on for the Central Powers. I think this one is pretty much done. But hey, let's just give it another whirl here. We're on round 16, Sweet 16, and we'll see what happens in just a moment. Alright, so we're getting right now near the end of it all. I know we figured 16, but we might do 17 here. But I think the writing's definitely on the wall here. Some key notes is the Austro-Hungarians took back all their territory, but then the Italians came through in Tyrolia and had amazing rolls. There were only 5 Austro-Hungarians in there, but they killed them all and only took 2 hits. And they backed out of Venice because there's this big stack of tanks. And as you know, tanks are very impressive on the attack and pretty anemic on the defense. So if you can get them to attack you and then you can come in later, that's usually the way you want to do it. Over here, the Americans have had some great success, and you'll even see they've got ships in here. Why is that? Well, because Constantinople fell to the British. And so on the American turn, they could come through without worrying about mines and all that sort of nastiness. They landed in Romania and they killed 8 Germans and sustained no losses. Now here's a point of contention. I've seen some on the ANA site and just with friends and whatnot, different discussions. So when the Russian Revolution happens, it says that the Central Powers may no longer go into any Russian territories, Russian-controlled territories. Doesn't say anything about the alliance. It does say that Russia is neither a friend nor enemy to anybody, but it doesn't say anything about the alliance. I even have errata sheets that I printed up, and none of them talk about it at all. And so what happened here was the British came into Sevastopol hoping to come up here and provide some support. And so once they came in here, this actually, it's a German marker now, but it was a British. Essentially. But can they take control of it, or can they just go on it? And then, since the British are on it, if they control it, the Germans can come in because it's no longer considered a Russian territory. So in the comments below, if anybody wants to weigh in on that, let me know, because what this does is that if the British can come in here but the Central Powers cannot, this gives the British a huge advantage, because they can come up into here, and then just start chipping away at Central Powers' economy, and the Central Powers basically have to leave large armies behind to stop that. But if they can be on the offensive, they can kind of nip that in the bud. So let me know what you think about that rule. It seems a little odd, and maybe I'm misreading it, but we've played this a lot, and when the Russian Revolution happens, typically, this isn't happening and the British aren't building down here anymore because they've got to worry about France. But here it seemed to be working out for them. So the longer the game goes, as you know, the worse it gets for the Central Powers. So here we are. We're about to start 17. And, we'll see how it goes here. Austria-Hungary definitely has some problems, but they've got 2 empty zones here that they can go grab $4. But they've got to take care of this. The Germans have to take care of that, and then there's more British on the way. And the Germans have no supply line here. This is a one-and-done thing. And they don't have many infantry left, only 1 arty. So there's not a lot of punch there. It's a whole bunch of 2s, essentially. So we'll do one more little round here. If Austria-Hungary fails to take back Tyrolia and fails to crush Romania, we'll probably call it, because they need to get rid of that, because then the Americans are waiting for a while for any big force. They got 3 here, but way over here is their next load, And it's a big one. It's got 18 units in it, or 19 units, 18. Not why would you have 19? There's 9 boats, and so 18 units. So it's a big army, right? It's a couple of turns build for most empires. Up here in France, of course, the French dispatched the Germans. The British took Picardy without a fight. The British have built up their transport force, so they're going to be landing 12 units a turn here pretty soon. I think, honestly, I think it's over, but I just want to see what Austria-Hungary does here. But I think things are not looking too well here. That is an old marker from Holland. All right, Holland. All right, so we'll see what goes on here. Turn 17, but I think we're pretty much done here. All right, well, that's the end, folks. There's really not much for the Germans here. You know, they can come down here and mess things up, but I thought, you know, I'm going to put the whole British build there, and that chokes this off pretty badly. Like, they're pretty much done. The Americans took back Romania. It took a few hits, but they took it back. The Americans and Italians have landed in Trieste with a decent little force there, more than what Vienna can handle. And these guys here are tied down. There are 18 infantry here, 16 infantry here for the Austro-Hungarians, but again, you know, they could come back here and take Trieste, but that's pretty much it. So I don't give much for their chances. And up here on the Western Front, it's basically 2 economies versus 1. So granted, the Germans are making $47, which is nice, but the UK made 48, and then France is making 29-30 each round. So not much for it. Plus this stack here, anything that the Austro-Hungarians can put in there, the Americans will come by, take Albania with a stack of 18 guys probably, and that's it. The British will take Serbia. You know, they can't take Trieste back and protect Budapest and Galicia. Like, this is a house of cards right now. So the Germans could come here and probably take care of these Americans without sustaining too many hits. Absolutely. But then that stack of artillery, the tanks, the fighter, that's 19 artillery, by the way, shooting at a 4 if that plane survives. So that's it for that, right? So yeah, it's over. Another Central Powers loss, and as I played the game and I had the battles, there weren't too many. I think we had about 5-6 battles on here. The attackers seem to do fairly well, but you need to bring a lot of infantry with you, and so I think if I do play this, like if I make this a thing that we're going to do, you're going to have to peel off artillery every now and again just so you have more infantry, so you can actually win this map and win the terrain and the territory, pardon me, and kick the enemy off. Because without infantry in this, you know, if you come in with 5 infantry, well, defending artillery can pick that off in 5 rounds if they shoot well enough, right? So I think I really like this, and I'm biased because I put it together. But please give me your thoughts on it. Give me your reactions to this little map. Of course, this is non-sanctioned by Wizards or Larry Harris or anybody important. It's just something I thought I'd give it a whirl with. Let me know if you think it should be in, you know, just one territory, like maybe in capitals. You can only do in capitals or whatever. I do like the historical choke points, though, of Venice and Tyrolia. And, of course, Picardy and Belgium and Burgundy and Lorraine were all trench city. But, yeah. I look forward to your thoughts, your responses on this. Hope you've enjoyed this. And yeah, we're back at school now. The students can only come in very infrequently, and not many of them are. We have about 1,000 students in our school, and we have about 40 to 50 students dropping by each day, so 4 or 5%. And so it's pretty slow, but it's we're near the end of the year, and but it's taking me away from gaming as much as I had before when I didn't have to actually go into school. I could do my work in the morning and then do the games in the afternoon. But now it's I got to do my little bit of prep in the morning and then go to work in the afternoon, morning and afternoon, and then in the evening it's family time. So, but we'll see. Hopefully I can get another game going, and don't forget our Bloodbath game is ongoing. I'm just about to film the America-China turn for turn 7 of 8 of the Bloodbath rules, and it's a tense game. I tell you, it's going to come right down to the wire, which is a sign of a good rule set. So it's still getting tweaked here and there, but for the most part, it's really solid. So check it out. Myself, Detroit at Axis and Allies the Garrison, G.I. Joe, Hambone HQ, and Matt Todd. We all have our videos going up every day. There's a couple videos going up, so we're moving right along. So maybe when you've watched this, the game's already over. We'll see. All right, but thanks for watching, folks. Really appreciate your patronage and your support and your comments. And again, if you've got comments about this, please leave them. But again, as a teacher, you're kind of like my students, and I'm going to say you can't say, oh, it's good, and then that's it. Or you can't say, oh, it sucks, and that's it. Defend your answer, let me know. Don't worry too much about telling me tweaks for this thing, because there's a few I'm going to make already. But just tell me your overall impression of it, and whether or not it is something that you would be interested in giving a whirl. All right, once again, folks, thanks for watching, and sorry to the Central Powers again, but hey, hug your loved ones, let them know they're special to you. Tell your friends that you're so thankful they play games with you online and in person, and until next time, may those dice be with you.